Yeah, it's actually going to take longer than, unfortunately. They said they're waiting until after the elections, right? And then it depends if Trump wins or Kamala wins. It's going to become more complicated. What? No, I hadn't. You know what? I might have tried to once. No, no. No. I need to. You're right. Thank you for the reminder. I don't have a car because I'm not home, but I'm going Okay, so good morning, everyone. We're going to start. Does everyone have a page? You have a... okay, so okay, you can pass them to the row behind. Yeah, over here. Coming here. And just let me know if we have enough, if we need more. We need more pages. Yeah, we need more. That's okay. Yeah, one page. And I'm not even sure we're going to use it, so it's easy. Hi. What's your name? Lovely to meet you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to introduce, Dr. Jonnie Schnytzer. What, he introduced himself already?
No, not yet.
You're a doctor.
I am a doctor.
I said Dr. Jonnie, right? Not a professor yet.
No.
We're very glad that he joined our staff. And can you tell what his accent is? Australian. We didn't have an Aussie yet. Now we do. I just wanted to tell you that just a new thing that we're doing in Matan. Matan Women Support Tzahal and Miluim families. So I wanted to tell you that we decided to salute the women soldiers and the wives of those serving and invite them to learn at Matan at no cost. Not the mothers of the Miluim, I'll go break. The wives of, please let people know, it's very important for me that they feel that they're seen and that we support them even if they want to be on Zoom. Don't worry, you'll get a WhatsApp and an email from me, don't worry. Okay, next, but people don't read them, that's why I have to stand here. Okay, next week, we're starting also, we're asked to tie tzitzit for soldiers, and there will be a presentation how to tie the tzitzit. Places are limited to 15. Next Monday at 1 o'clock here, you're going to get a link to sign up. The third thing is there's an organization called for the IDF, women that are cooking for soldiers. And my sister happens to be head of that. Hani, you're on that also. Oh, nice. Yeah. So my sister, Hanali, and I said, I'll help her because they have 20, 30, 40 women and they send out thousands a week to soldiers. So I said, I'll put up a pickup box. I'll put a box here. You come, you can bring dry goods to put in the box and they'll collect and I'll help them. They've been supporting it for a whole year on their own. Here, you will get a notice what to bring. There will be a drop-off point here, so I'm just letting you know. And it should be Torah Shel Chesed. Okay, sorry.
So good morning, everyone. So this course is a very simple course. We're dealing with a very simple question on what it means to be Jewish. You know, does anyone know here, for example, when this question was first asked? You know, But a little bit, whoever doesn't know, so just in a nutshell about me. So I research medieval Kabbalah. I feel most at home. 13th century Catalonia. I deal with Kabbalists that are writing about reincarnation for the first time in Hebrew, reincarnation into the inanimate, flora, fauna, humans, the sort of entanglement of being, dealing with different worlds, and then connecting it to the contemporary world. But this course, I think, began, I'll take you back to 2014. 2014, I was the advisor to the CEO of Birthright. And this is after a couple of years that I was working for Stand With Us, where I was trying to explain around the world why we're okay. And then I moved to explain to Jews why they're okay. I don't know what's harder, I know what's more important. And one of my roles at Birthright was I managed all the groups that came, or the partnerships outside of North America. And so one of the most fascinating things was questions that would come in from anyone looking if they're legit, if they're allowed to come on the trip, if they're eligible. And I'll never forget this. There was a young woman that wrote. She was in first year in university in Australia, a place outside of Melbourne I'd never heard of. And she writes the following. So my mum is Jewish, but I've never been baptized. Can I come on the trip? And it's such a gorgeous question, because it's tamim, it's very naive, and but it gets to the essence of, well, wait a second, what are we asking here? Right? Who's allowed to come on a birthright trip? And this connects to a question that David Ben-Gurion once wrote to Agnon. David Ben-Gurion in the 50s is a very busy man. He's trying to build, certain the defensive structure that will protect the state, and he's trying to build a national library, and never again will things get lost, as the Nazis had this plan to burn everything and then have a Jewish museum in Prague. And Ben-Gurion's like, I don't want that to ever happen. And with all this busy schedule, he finds time to pen a letter to Agnon, Shmuel Yosef Agnon, and he asks him, what does it mean to be Jewish? And Agnon writes a very brief paragraph where essentially saying, just, leave me alone. Like, you shouldn't be dealing with such a silly question. You have more important things to do, is what he said. And in fact, what Agnon was perhaps saying to Ben-Gurion is, if you think you're going to get a quote out of me to add into Chok HaShvut, who's allowed to come to Israel or not, or who's Jewish, forget about it. This is a serious question. Where does this even begin? What's the first line? Right? What does it mean to be Jewish? How do we even begin to think about this? A few years ago, another story. A few years ago, there was a Norwegian bookshop, not Jewish, Norwegian bookshop that was about to, got into an economic hardship because of the rise of ebooks and digital books, like happened to many. And I heard that they were coming out with this, creating a subjective lexicon, subjective encyclopedia. And I was a little bit curious. I was especially curious once I found out that they have an entry for Jew. And then I was like, okay, I want to buy this. And just to be sure, what is a subjective encyclopedia? So if I were to ask you, what is Bar Ilan University? Then the objective answer is, it's an academic institute established in the year, yada, yada, and so on and so forth. But subjectively, it would be anything that anyone answers. So I would like to begin this course with the entry of Jew. It's anonymous. I have no idea who wrote this. Okay. So how does it begin? What do I win? Oh boy, says the voice. Just you wait. Just you wait. A prize like this comes along only once in a, well, once. And you, buddy boy, you're the big winner. So get used to this voice, because we're going to be working together for a long time. And I mean a long time. Is it a job? He asks. No, absolutely not. Although there is quite a lot of work involved and a lot of responsibility. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some large-scale suffering down the line. And the payoff will always be semi-opaque. Just give it some time to get into a rhythm. 8, 9 generations before it'll be your thing. Like freckles or lactose intolerance. But why me? Ha, says the voice. What a Jewish question. Why you? Because you're chosen. Yes, but how was I chosen? How is anyone chosen? I put a bunch of names inside a rotating lucite cylinder. Are you familiar with lucite? Doesn't matter. Anyway, I cranked the sucker a few times, reached, pulled out a slip, and presto, here we are. Sounds kind of random, he says. Maybe, chuckles the voice, or was it Providence? Ha! See what I did there? One man's fate is another man's rotating lucite cylinder. That's called metaphysics. He nods, not really understanding, but also not wanting to look dumb. They chat for a while longer, small talk really, until he gathers the courage to ask his final question. So what's in it for me? This entry, I don't know what you think about this entry. But what do you think about the essence of what it means to be Jewish? There's nothing historical here. It's not telling you what is the story, but there are a lot of things that we all relate to because you're laughing. Right? There's something very familiar. There is this element of Jewish question. Right? When did Jews begin to ask questions? Biblical Jews never ask questions. They only complain. Biblical Jews are not where Nobel Prize laureates begins. It is not where intellectual Einsteins begin. That is simply not the biblical Jew. Abraham, maybe. Come on. This is not there. It starts perhaps in the Talmud. It's not the Bible. So such a Jewish question, there's one element in this text which is rather new. And yet there's the element of suffering. Is that built in always? We'll move on to another story by way of introduction. The year is 1929. 1929, the chief rabbi in Libya is Rabbi Yitzchak Chai Buchbeza. He is a Tunisian-born rabbi. He's the Mara Da'atra, the Talmid Chacham, the Soloveitchik of Tunisia. And so he's chosen to be the chief rabbi of Libya. In 1929, the king of Italy, who, they rule over Libya, comes for a visit. And when he comes for a visit, he wants to visit the imam and the chief rabbi. And we have a photo. You can see online a photo of the king inside the big shul in Tripoli and Buchbeza standing by his side. We are told that upon this visit, the king is very impressed with Buchbeza. And he says to him, look, in the summer, my daughter's getting married. I'd love for you to come to the wedding. Will you come? And Rabbi Yitzchak says, of course. So Rabbi Yitzchak goes to the wedding, lovely wedding in Rome. And the king then comes to Buchbeza. There's no Sheva Brachos, but he comes to him afterwards and he says to him, I'd really like, I'm so grateful that you came. Is there anything you need? Anything I can give you? Sort of nudging, maybe a raise, something like that. Buchbeza says, I don't need anything. And the king is, adamant, no, come on. And the king, something. Buchbeza thinks and says, you know what, there is something. So there's the Vatican. And I heard that, somewhere in the lower basements, there are things that belong to us a long time ago. I'd love to see. Could I have a tour? And the king says, look, that's not my jurisdiction. That's the Pope, but I'll give him a call. And he goes and checks with the Pope. He comes back to Buchbeza, says, no problem. I'll give you a shamash. Someone will come, will take you down, give you a tour. So there you go. What do you want? How do we know this story? The very last treatise, the very last work that Buchbeza wrote was a sort of commentary on how to read the Talmud. Different complicated words in the Talmud. And in the introduction, he writes about this story. And it was just before his death. And the shamash takes him down, and there's this curtain, we're told, and he flips open this curtain, and Buchbeza's looking, and then the shamash asks him, do you want me to open the curtain a bit more? And he says, Ra'iti dai, I have seen enough. From that moment, for 40 days, Rabbi Yitzchak Chai Buchbeza is on a Ta'anit Dibur. He's not speaking. And on the 40th day, he dies, gives his soul back to God. We don't know what he saw. We don't know what Ra'iti dai means. But here's the question that interests us. You're the chief rabbi of Libya. You know halacha backwards. He wrote a commentary on the Zohar. Like, Buchbeza has it all. Of all the things in the world you could ask for, of the things that you need, why does he ask for that? What is it about seeing that something, which is this element of Churban, this idea of this tragedy, how much is that built into what it means to be Jewish? If we go back to the Bible, was it always there? But at some point, it just becomes a thing, like the text tells us. Spanish Inquisition, Augustine, you don't even need to go into the medieval era. Look at how Christians are writing about Jews in order to create Christianity. It is very clear that there is a carnal Jew, a Jew that is symbolized by certain things. So what does it mean to be Jewish? How can we make sense of this?
You stood up and you wanted something back. You want to receive and maybe get it back.
Did he maybe want to get it back, or was there what void did it fill? Knowledge. To know. To see. So a few years ago, and this will be the final story that we conclude with before we begin what we're going to do here, how it's going to work, the challenges that we face. Quite a few years ago, my parents bought me Radical Then, Radical Now, by Jonathan Sacks. And it's an awesome book because it was the first book I ever read that I felt, wow, you can write in a cool way about Judaism. Like in a way that is actually compelling. I went to Yeshivat Bnei Akiva. I had never read a text that made me want to read more about just what is this about. It was captivating. And it was there that I think in the introduction, he asks, who is the first Jew that asks, why be a Jew? When does this begin? When would a Jew start asking why be Jewish? Of the Churban, right? So after the Spanish expulsion, we have Rabbi Yitzchak Arame. We might get to him, and horrific things are happening. And it's only then that for the first time, Sacks realizes a Jew asks, for the first time ever, why be Jewish? As a question. Not what does it mean to be Jewish, but why? Or what's in it for me? As a Jewish question. It's not asked in the Bible.
So why
there is
only then? I mean, why not during the Crusades? Or why in the time of the Sarasi our game of food?
Right? So what we're interested in is to try and go on a journey throughout Jewish history, because that's part of what this course is about. Because what we're going to realize is that the way we answer this question is very much based on the time we're living in, where our parents were born, what stories we were told, which books happen to be on our bookshelf, and how marginalized certain aspects are or aren't. What does it mean to be Jewish? Do we have any contenders? A one-liner. What does it mean to be Jewish? Name? Yes. Okay, so what in fact you're saying is halakha.
A calf is born to a cow. A Jew is born of a Jew.
Okay, but there are no Jews in the Torah. There are Ivrim, and then there are Israelim.
Okay, so that's like when you're 2 years old, then you're 20, then you're 40, then you're 60. I mean, it first starts with the Hebrews, and they're Israelites, and then the remnants are the Judeans, and then they're Jews. Okay.
So what it means to be Jewish is to be born to a Jewish mother.
Yes. Matters of observance, more or less or not, are a completely separate subject, because it's not a religion. It's a construct unlike any other. It's a people, and it's tasked with guarding and teaching and entrusted.
Oh, you've elaborated a little bit now. It started simple, right? You had it as hello, and then it's become now there's a broch. So yeah. I'm asking for simple definition.
That's the bottom line, and then there's the halachic ports of entry, and that's another matter. But that's the simple definition. Where to whom you're born, where you're born, when you're born, like you said. You know, that's not up to you. That's the world that you come into, but you come in as a Jew and you have no choice. It's a given.
Okay, so that's one answer. Name? What's your name?
Myra.
So you're saying that's not the. So what would you say?
Who was a Jew?
What does it mean to be Jewish? What does it mean?
The ordinary.
It's very interesting. Like, we go through a lot of suffering, and, we don't have an answer to that question, right? Well, what does it mean? And it's a broch because we have we have children, we have friends, we have family, we explain this to the world, and we don't know for ourselves what this means. One of the reasons this course came about, and it actually began with this question of this person that wanted to come on Birthright, was there are no courses that go through Judaism 101 in a very simple way. And when I say simple, I mean, if I would ask anyone here, give me a sentence, the story of the Torah, what's it about? I'll make it easier. I have a daughter, Eliana. She's in 2nd grade. A sentence that Eliana will understand. What you'd write on the back of the book, right? We have a problem. How do you choose a book? You either read the first page or the back, but there's nothing in the back of the Torah, right? So we're going to invent that. What would be written if you had one line?
Birth of a nation.
What?
Birth of a nation.
Birth of a nation.
Good luck.
Good luck. Good luck. I like that. That's already branding. That's taking it. That's sort of trying to feel good. We're going before that. Just the basic facts before we build a strategy of how to go through this and get to Pesach and have a bite to eat. But it's about, okay. So that's one aspect. But again, very quickly we realize, yes. A code to live a beautiful life, a meaningful life. So we have a code, meaningful life, which again, I'm not sure Eliana would understand the word meaningful, to be fair. I'm looking for dry facts, not philosophy. I'm looking for the most basic, any technical writers sort of, what do you write? What is the dry, like you have the dimensions of a product you buy in one line. What is the very most basic story stripped of all its philosophy and meaning?
Good luck.
Good luck. You stick with good luck. I like that. Of a Jewish people.
Of the Jewish people, the way that they lived through 2012, through 1,000 years. It was over a lot. And
but that's
the laws that they live by, their heroes.
Sophisticated.
And their relationship to God.
Too sophisticated.
It's sophisticated. It's no, the Torah, 5 books of Moses, where it all began. One more try.
It's the ongoing story of life, the personal responsibility to continue on. His Yadu is a continuation. It's continuing what we got, it's being ordered, and it's passing it on. And it's
but beyond that, does the word achrayut appear?
Responsibility?
That's a late how do we even know to detach later elements, developments of the way we read the text and the text itself in Pshat? The Torah in Pshat. Here's our first challenge. Here's our first problem. Our first problem begins with, when the people of the book first appears? It's a Quranic invention. Yes, the Quran. The Quran talk about branding. So the people of the book, Quran. Now, so we're the people of the book, and we're the people of the book because we get the first divine book. Now, this is the first page. In Mikrot Dolot, right? There is a very big problem here. Can anyone identify the problem? Where is the original text?
That little bit on the top.
That little, it's been reduced, forgive me, Mikrot Dolot, to the little bit on the top. That's what do we even have a chance in understanding what the primary source teaches us when it's become that little bit on the top? Now, the only ones, probably fair to say, there might be a few tzaddikim, the only ones that really get a chance are those that lane on Shabbos, right? Mondays, Thursdays, Shabbos, you see Genesis, you begin, you don't see anything else. There's no Rashi in a Torah scroll. There's no Rambam. There's no even Unkelus. There never was. They never allowed it. And it's been reduced to this. When was the last time we opened the book and just read it to try and understand what is going on? Right? We don't look at the Pshat. The Pshat. Now, what this means, in fact, and this is potentially fascinating, that the way we think about our most prized book is an invention of the modern printing press. The reason Mikrot Dolot came about, it's not nice to say, is for economic reasons, right? Selling books is not a profitable business, just isn't. So if you're going to sell a Torah or you're going to add into it, I'm going to sell you, it comes with a Bravanel, it comes with Rashi. Oh, okay, bring it on. I get all that. The Talmud, if you open the Talmud, everyone knows what a page of a Talmud looks like. Has anyone ever looked at a manuscript before the birth of the printing press, how Jews study Talmud? There was no Rashi and Tosfot around them. Just wasn't there. Do you know who invented that structure?
Christians.
A non-Jew.
Wow.
Because it makes money. This is how you sell it. This is how you create a business. So a big part of how we have come to understand how we teach our children, how schools, how Bnei Akiva, me, it doesn't matter who teach us, has to do with the birth of a medieval printing press. We're not reading the text anymore. Do we know to differentiate between potentially the 4 books that made Jewish history? The Torah, the Talmud, Guide of the Perplexed, Jewish philosophy, and Zohar. This will be our first stop in this course, meaning I've only touched upon one challenge. The challenge is we don't read the primary material anymore. And this is why this very basic question of what is the Torah in a line is super important. If we don't have an answer for that, it means we're not studying Torah. We're studying Torah in a way that throughout time has become the way Jews study Torah, and that is through commentaries. Tell me what Rashi says. You want a good vort? Here's what the Rebbe Milubavitch says. Kol hakavod bekvodo munach. But the Rebbe Milubavitch, to get to his chidush, Rashi, to get to his chidush, what were they doing? They were reading the Torah. They weren't looking at anything else. So what's happened to us? We don't sit, we don't look at the basic text. Same goes with Talmud, same goes with anything.
That's not open during Torah reading and shul, or reading the basic text.
Yes. But even then, one could argue they are reading it for liturgical purposes. It's part of a ritual.
Yeah.
No one is reading it today. And what you're saying is fascinating because everyone hears it, but how many of us, have you heard the difference between, so Uri, my eldest, he doesn't know yet, but he's 9. His teacher for Bezrat Hashem, for laning for Bar Mitzvah will be a Moroccan. Because, and I know who, because it was the first time I heard Moroccan laning. Has anyone here heard a Moroccan read? Like a Moroccan that learned properly, not stam. Temani is different. It's very different. Secrets come out of the tones. You hear things that even if a child does not understand a text, there is a tradition that the sound you make is a pirush, is wanting you to, it's open to understanding. And we don't even realize what ramifications there are to the way Ashkenazim read, the way Sfaradim read. Is it because we are meant to do this for ritual purposes or educational purposes? And I've got some news. Most of us in shul, it's not for educational purposes, but maybe it should be. We don't read the Torah anymore, even properly. There's no chance when we read the Torah, forgive me, all the chazanim, of really hearing it in a way that it counts. That a child might be curious to, what? You just said Sheshmot Shana in Noach. Maybe you should be saying, it's like in Megillat Esther. There's a way to say it in a way that when Shushan is embarrassed by what has just happened, the anti-Semitism, you suddenly feel uncomfortable with what you have just heard. Why didn't anyone get up? Why didn't anyone do anything? And if you just read it as Eir Shushan Navocha, it has no meaning. There's no chance of you being interested in what the text has to tell me. So we're not reading the text. We're not listening to the text properly. So let's start reading the text. Okay, so that's one thing we're going to be doing. The one way to understand what it means to be Jewish, we're going to be humble. We're not really going to give an objective answer. What fascinates us, this is an important distinction, is how our primary sources and very fascinating and important figures throughout Jewish history, and some non-Jews viewed what it means to be Jewish. We're going to be reading the text and trying to understand, potentially for the first time in our lives, what the text has to say. We'll be able to walk out and say, okay, we've looked at the Torah. This is what it is to be an Ivri. This is the purpose. And then we're going to look at the Talmud and we're going to say, wait a second, that's completely different. And then we're going to ask, but what are the common denominators? What are those things that you cannot dare touch? And yet, all the cloaking around it is going to drastically change. And then Maimonides. When all of a sudden Jews... So the first book we get happens 4,000 years ago. And if you're a Jew, you don't even know what this means. You walk into a library, it has nothing to do with your reality. You have one book, and guess what? You don't even own it because it's too expensive. You know the king has it. So if you're a Jew 4,000 years ago, you know the king has the Torah.
Once every 7 years, you go to after like a year.
Yafeh. And then Nehemiah and other things come about, but so you hear it every so often, but you know there's this book. Now there's another problem. You don't know how to read and write. Most of us don't know how to read and write at the time. There was a book written by two economists, an Oxford publication, I think it's called the Chosen People, that looks into this drastic demographic drop around the Second Temple. And they ask, how do you explain that millions of Jews disappear? There were no wars at the time, there were no plagues, and the answers that they come up with is very novel. It just costs too much to be a Jew. It's like if you ask, one of my Zayda or my grandfather, they say the same thing. It was, to be religious cost too much money. This is what we were told, that they would say that to be religious, to keep Shabbos, you need to have money. It's funny, you need to have money to keep... What? Nachon, and biduk, and tell the Supreme, and tell a famous case. Nachon. So at some point, way back in time, Jews have one book on the bookshelf, and it's called the Bible. Okay, we have, and it takes time, and it becomes 24 books. Those 24 books that were canonized already by the time we have our second book, which is the Talmud, right? Because who canonizes the 24 books? Who decides the Maccabees are out, or they're external texts, and we like them, but they're not completely in, but they're not Christian, and so on and so forth. So for a while, we have 4,000 years ago, a first text. And then we have the Talmud, which is, what appears on the first page of the Talmud? What is the first sentence? It's Masechet Brachot. Meimatai Korim Shema B'Aravit. That is fascinating. The first sentence of the second book a Jew gets begins with a question. And the figure that asks this question is a rabbi. But we've never heard of a rabbi. There are no rabbis in the Torah. Not a single one. Something has drastically changed. And then 900 years later, we're going to go to Alexandria and Cairo. And all of a sudden, Jews have a different problem. They're reading that God's outstretched hand is what took us out of Egypt. And the problem is that in shul, while there's laning going on, like, the students that have comic books inside your notebooks in class, so they have Aristotle in Arabic, and they're reading Aristotle, and they say, wait a second, but it's not logical that God has an outstretched hand. And they become perplexed and embarrassed with the text they believe in. And that's going to change everything. Everything. And then 100 years later, the question that begs itself is, well, if it's so abstract, then who's listening to my prayers? And then Kabbalists are going to change everything. So one of the things we're going to be looking at is primary texts and trying to understand by these four main texts what it means to be Jewish, how it evolved. We're going to notice when certain words appeared for the first time. For example, Mashiach, Tchiat HaMetim, Geula are not biblical words. And I'm not talking about to anoint a king. Mashiach. Everyone knows here when I say Mashiach, why is it that we know what Mashiach means? And how can we explain that there is this gap between the Torah and the Talmud, where all of a sudden the eschaton and the happily ever after is what we're thinking about all the time, and we're not really there in the Torah. We're not there. No one's thinking about the happily ever after in the Torah, at least it's not in the text and the pshat. And all of a sudden, by the time we get to the Talmud, it becomes a thing. Does this have anything to do with Christianity? Does it have anything to do with the birth of the fathers of Christianity? Maybe yes, maybe no. we will look a little bit, dabble just a little bit into Augustine and how the non-Jew views the Jew and how potentially this influences Talmudic texts like Lo B'Shamayim Hi. It's not all in the heavens. Is this an inherent Jewish teaching, or is it a reaction to something going on outside, to how the non-Jew sees the Jew by the time there is a Jew? Another way of answering this question, we're not only going to look at these general texts and go through history, through the Hasidic movement or Zionism or modern day thinkers like Shalom Rosenberg. I'm going to try and choose some that we know less of but are super important, is take the Siddur Tefillah, take the prayer book. The prayer book is a fascinating book because the prayer book can be viewed as pages upon which battles, fierce battles, are made between philosophers and Kabbalists and Sfardim and Ashkenazim, or it can be looked as this harmonious place where things come together. How do we understand, for example, that there are certain prayer books that Igdal, right? The pure Igdal, Rambam, is simply not accepted. Oy vavoy if you put Igdal Elohimcha in you, how dare you put that philosophical, Aristotelianly infused text into your Siddur Tefillah. And we're going to ask, how is it that in Rinat Israel, before we shake our lulav or count the Omer, somehow it got a hechsher that we say, I'd love to see if there's an English translation to this. We say some text about unifying the divine mommy and daddy. That's what it says. We don't want them to get a divorce. That's what we say before we count the Omer, before we shake the lulav. How did that get in? How did that get a hechsher? Why is it that certain things do, certain things don't? Why is it that as late as 16th century, when a Jew pens it's not even a prayer, it's a one-liner, it's like a motto, Moderni, becomes kosher in every single Siddur across the board. Doesn't matter if you're Moroccan, if you're Babylonian, if you're Ashkenazi, you have to appreciate how odd that is if you look at the making of the prayer book. So we're going to look at the prayer book to try and understand what, for example, the Reform movement took out in Germany in the early 19th century and what had to be taken out for them in order to try and create something new and what that says about what it means to be Jewish. When was the first Siddur Tefillah? The word Siddur, there's davening in the Talmud, but that's not a Siddur. So 9th century, we'll ask questions like that. We'll look at Giur, right? That's understanding how Josephus. So we're going to look also at this thematically, not only historically, but at a question like who becomes a Jew, who do we decide, and how that question has changed over time. We'll look at the Rav Amsalem of Shas, who wrote a marvelous treatise on what it means to be Jewish. We'll compare it to Josephus in the Second Temple era and say, so where are the gaps? And what's going on? What has happened over time without passing judgment, but just asking intellectually how Jews have viewed how you can join that club that no one wants to be a part of, but once you're part of it, and so on, and Groucho Marx and the known joke. So there are many different ways in which we are going to be viewing this. We'll look at Jewish history, thematically. Yes?
I have cousins, others not Jewish, never convert, and they say that they're Jewish and they came here to study in Israel. Came on birthright.
Well, birthright. So whether they're baptized or not. So birthright.
And they insist that they're Jewish.
Because the state of Israel.
Tell these people they're not Jewish.
The state of Israel went with Hitler. It's not nice to admit that the state of Israel went with Hitler. I'm not passing judgment factually, meaning if for Hitler, it was that I'm not asking mother, father, if I go back 3 generations. So that's what the state of Israel will say. Who can come on birthright is determined by what happened in the Holocaust. And that's a certain development. Yeah. We are now that we have gone through our brief introduction, and we've seen we posed one challenge before we start with the Torah. So our first challenge was the physical book, the material aspect of the book, and how this actually, its huge ramifications on how we even come to approach the book. And we've seen it's a real broch. But there are other issues. When we read, for example, a commentary on the Akedah, how aware are we of when Rashi says something, what it's like for a Jew to be living in France in a medieval setting, and how we can detach or not his answer to his commentary on a certain biblical issue from the historic setting, which is the same to say about Maimonides, about Samson Raphael Hirsch, and what's going on with emancipation and the reform movement, right? One of the most wonderful commentaries on the Torah was written by very late in the game, and it is in a very idiosyncratic, specific historic setting, which cannot be detached from the commentary. When we're teaching these texts or reading these texts, are we aware of these backgrounds and are we thinking about them? So our question, in fact, is there a pure answer to this question? Is what changes over time the content? Or could it be it is more the structure? It's always the same, and the argument is over the sort of, the dressing of this question. How do we can we even, for example, detach? It's only in the medieval era where astrology, again, copied from Greek, philosophically into Arabic, and then Jews begin copying and getting into astrology seriously. Ibn Ezra, 12th century, 11th century, 13th century becomes big. Jews begin to write about astrology. Now, anyone here who's into astrology, whether you are or not, I think we'll all agree, anyone who looks at the world or buys into astrology, it doesn't affect a part of your life. It's pretty big. So once even something like the discipline of astrology gets a hechsher, how does that change how we view the Torah? How we view questions about us? Deterministic questions much like this, right? Astrology can be stripped to one basic thing. Our ability to gain knowledge on the specific influence that certain astral constellations have on the life of an individual or even nations or even a period of time. Once that becomes a thing, and a Jew's been suffering for a long time, it's only a matter of time until a Jew says, wait a second, it's not my fault. I'm not bad. It's because I've been connected to Saturn. And all the melancholy tributes of Saturn and characteristics have been pinned to me by the non-Jew, and yeah, it's true. This is a big thing. And this is external. This is astrology. It's kivyachol, not kashur to our Bet Midrash. So the more we think about this, the more we realize that to answer this question, this isn't just what did Ibn Ezra think. It's that Ibn Ezra is a full-fledged adoption of astrology that then 150 years later, our Kabbalist Nachmanides will incorporate, albeit implicitly, into his commentary on the Torah, and that changes everything. So these are the sort of questions we're going to look at. We're going to try and keep it as simple as possible, because it's a simple course. And the way we're going to begin is with the first book. And we're going to do something very, very simple. So we said that before we try and answer in a sentence what the Torah is about, because we won't get today to what the Torah is about, we will begin in a nutshell. Usually before you buy a book on Amazon or you walk into Stimatsky or Barnes and Nobles or, wherever, you open the first page, you flip through. In fact, Agnon, you know Agnon's trick? Agnon had a trick. He writes about this in his novel Shira, his greatest novel. He says, an author should always be judged by the following. You open any given page and read a paragraph. So Agnon is up here. The bar is high. But not everyone is at Agnon's level. So you open the first page because everyone thinks of this wow opening. Okay. So we open the Torah. Doing this class in Hebrew only for this bit was easier for reasons we're about to find out. So let's just begin and see if we're on the same page. Can we understand what the Torah is about through the first few sentences? In the beginning of God's creating the heavens and earth, when the earth was astonishingly empty with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the waters. God said, let there be light, and there was light, and that was day one. Does this tell us anything about what the Torah is about as a story for Eliana second grade? What, you know what, let's ask it differently. What's even going on here? Pshat. What?
Prologue.
The prologue. So what's going on? That there's a God. Placing him. Where is he? See, that's a great question. Where is he? So the first verse tells us, right? We're just on Pshat. First verse tells us that he creates heaven and earth. Yeah? But then by the time we get to the second verse, we're told, matter of factly, that there are waters. Wait a second. Where did that come from? You told me you created heaven and earth, and now you're telling me there are waters. That's a pretty big deal. Where did they come from? What's going on here? It says in the first verse that there's God, Elohim. And in the second verse, we've just begun the book. We suddenly learn about Ruach Elohim. What's the difference between the two? We've just started. God and the divine presence, or Ruach Elohim. Can we even understand the simple meaning of what is going on here? It's the first few lines. Like, what is going on here? And you know what? Here's the biggest question that I'm waiting for someone to ask. Bereshit. Potentially the greatest mistranslation in history. Right? King James, you can thank him. Bereshit. What is Bereshit? The easiest factual way to look at, what's your name? So what were you saying? So
that Reshit, it refers to the Torah and to the name of Israel.
But you're bringing this from a midrash. I'm looking for pshat. We're looking at Bereshit. So I'm going to cheat just a little bit. I'm not bringing a midrash. I'm going to go back to the first translator of the text. Who was it? Yonatan ben Uziel. We have Unkelus, and we have before him Yonatan ben Uziel. So we're talking about Rabbi Akiva. We're talking, way, way back, 2,000 years ago. And how does he translate Bereshit? B'chuchmata. By means of wisdom. Now, this is very interesting because I'm not trying to understand if it's true or not, but I know something for a fact. That 2,000 years ago, Jews, their Yiddish, their Ladino, their English is Aramaic. And so Yonatan ben Uziel, who wants to explain simply to a Jew how the book begins, he goes with by means of wisdom. It's safe to say that changes everything. Wisdom. So Bereshit, why? Because he learns from David HaMelech, Reshit Chochma Yirat Hashem, that Reshit has to do innately with wisdom. So Bereshit, so what's it? In the beginning, how can we even read this properly without looking at what the word is? It changes everything. Reshit and Rosh, what? If we look at the grammar in Hebrew, it also makes no sense. And every commentator has looked at this. Bereshit bara Elokim. This is a very back to just say. Elokim bara. Right? Elokim bara bereshit et. Why are you saying bereshit? Why are you purposely beginning with a bet and not with an aleph? And this is still pshat guesswork. Why do you begin with a bet and not with an aleph? Why is God not there at the start and it's with bereshit? And we're still not sure if God is the outcome, the subject, or the object of the sentence. We have no clue. So it's almost as if, potentially purposely, the first paragraph actually has a moral agenda. Be humble. You have no idea what you're about to read. I'm purposely, right? This is as if what the author, the divine author is saying, I want to teach you a very simple lesson. And that lesson is, don't think you understand, and that's why I'm going to make the beginning so hard. You know what there are many beautiful Rashis. Do you know what one of the most beautiful Rashis is? The first Rashi. Do you know how he answers that question? Rashi, in his first Rashi, performs a mitzvah. Does anyone know what that mitzvah is? he does kibud horim. The first Rashi, he brings something b'shmo shel Rabbi Yitzchak. And who is Rabbi Yitzchak? You can't say that was accidental. There are 3 versions of Rashi. Rashi wrote a long version. We get the short version. But that means that it took him a long time to write a short letter. He dedicated time. This is someone that thinks about, right? To write briefly, you need a lot more time. So this is on purpose. The first Rashi is trying to tell you, begin with the mitzvah. My first Rashi, it's going to be Kibbutz Urim. I have to bring something for Rabbi Yitzchak, because without Rabbi Yitzchak, there is no Rashi. I'm not even aware of that. What is this text trying to tell us? Maybe we should be asking something about what is absent here. There are many things that are absent. Maybe you should go about this by why the Torah chooses this and not, as Rashi asks, start with the Jewish people. Well, Rashi says start with halacha. But Jewish people, why is it beginning with this very abstract, very difficult to understand? You know, even in Hebrew, the ending of the first day is Yom Echad. And then how do we call the second day? That makes no sense. You know, correct Hebrew, kivyachol, is Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, Revi, Smichut, right? You have one after the other. The first day is called Yom Echad, and all the rest are continuations of not the first, but the second, and meaning the Yom Sheni is continuation not to Rishon, but Echad. Why is that? The Torah is doing something on purpose. What's going on? What does it want to tell us? It's almost as if it's begging us to ask questions, but again, we are Jews that are late in the game. At the time, this is just the text. Someone reading this in an agricultural setting, you don't understand. Someone's telling you, you need to now, you know, your Shabbos will look completely differently. Things are going to change. What does a Jew understand about this text? So a Jew heard this every few years. What meaning does this even have? One could even argue it didn't have much, because what the Jew is waiting to hear was ramifications for my field. Right, Shabbos. I meant to work the land. Now, Shabbos, unlike Shemitah, the Torah is actually very clear on what you can and can't do, interestingly. It's very clear. Shabbos, very, very, very odd. So a farmer who is Jewish, and, you know, the Kohanim or the, you know, then the rabbis come and tell.
Can't hear you.
Now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So we don't understand the beginning. We don't really know what it's about. And one of the problems, as we said, it's because of Mikrot Gdolot. Because we're used to reading and taking in commentaries. We love commentaries. This is a problem, because Rashi read first the text and then he wrote a commentary. So we want to first understand the text. So we're going back to our first question. With this, we will conclude. What is the Torah about in a sentence? If you had to have a sentence that had all of the important objective bits, what is that? And for a second grader? Serta Dibrot.
It's a lot, but it includes, I'm the one God who had
Okay, so we're gonna go. Okay, Serdi brought someone else. Let's make it a bit, just a sentence.
If it's based from the
No, not that, based on the book. I'm now saying on the 5 books of Moses. If we need one line, factual, what it's about. So we have one attempt, the 10 Commandments.
God the creator and in charge of the world.
Okay, God, creator, in charge of the world. God and the Jewish people.
Introducing the creator and the purpose of his creation.
I love this. There's a big problem here. So here's an anthropological insight. So this shiur is being given in Israel, the land of Israel, right? Little bits. And it's the bit that's always left out in this class. Always. So you brought 3 of the 4 most important bits you can't keep out. A new set of rules, a God, a people, but land. So if I had to choose a sentence, tell me if you accept this sentence. It's a story about a God that chooses a people gives them a new set of rules to keep in an existing land. Do we buy? Is that okay? That's kosher? Existing. So if this is our story, there are many questions about this one-liner. Why are the rules new, but the land already exists? If the rules are so good, that's the million-dollar question. This is the first question any storyteller should ask, or anyone listening to this story. It's the first question to ask, in my mind, if we're looking at the Torah and the Pshat. Forget about complexities, forget about philosophy. If it's one God, one people, new laws, existing land, million-dollar question, why not give it to everyone?
They didn't accept it.
That's Midrash. Late, right? The name of the game here, when we're studying Torah, we're sticking to Torah Pshat. It doesn't, it mentions it nowhere in the text. Hashem was on a learning curve. Interesting. There were times in history that if a Jew said that, problematic. Interesting. No, interesting. What's your name? So there's something evolving in the text. Interesting. Okay, meaning from Genesis to
all the mistakes that we made already on our journey from Sinai. We kept making mistakes, and Hashem kept trying to push Moshe to get us back on.
But why one people? This is our sort of intro question. No, Torah Ma'amad Har Sinai again. The factual story, there is no, you know what, let's go with something easy, the Tower of Babylon. What happened there? Too much unity. Did they sin? No, that was, but that's before, that's in Noach, it's not with the Tower of Babylon. That brings about the flood. But with them, right, so even something like that, as a kind of the evolvement of the story or a development, right, the plot thickens, it's very vague. We're not sure what happens, but God doesn't like it. But it's not a no-no. But he decides to cancel the plan. But you know what it's like? You can read, if you read the Orach Chaim, right, 16th century Moroccan, it's almost like reading the Kuzari. Kavanotav tovot ma'asehem einam tovim. They had good intentions, bad idea. But we're not reading the literal meaning, because what we're going to is the commentators and saying, well, wait, how do you understand this? But the commentator is going to use this as part of making sense of your reality. When does Esav become for the first time, right? Because I come from a home where Esav is a good guy. It's very odd, but when you read the Pshat, even Zohar is, sympathetic toward, even Rashar Hirsch, so when does Esav become the bad guy?
When he identified with Rome.
So it's a commentary, and again, no passing judgment, but at some point, Esav's got to go. Not everyone thinks that, and that's where it becomes interesting, because, it's not quite like that. Are the avot and everything that the forefathers and mothers do, is it all great, or are there problems? Commentators that say, don't you dare say there are problems, and commentators that say, no, look, they made mistakes, and it's great that they made mistakes, because that's how you learn. But going back to our question, and what we're going to be doing next week, because we will conclude with this, is we will be looking into the Torah. And we will look to explain what it means to be Jew or Ivri, what it means to be a Hebrew or an Israelite, or the beginning of being Jewish in the Torah. And I'm going to offer a set of verses. So you have the source sheet. I'll challenge you to, bring different verses, not accept these verses. That'll make it more interesting. But the question is, can we boil it down to one word or one verb that explains everything about what it means to be Jewish, what Kedusha means in the Torah? before anything else. One word, one verb. That's the homework. What is that one verb? That's what we're going to be doing. What? Yirat. Maybe. Maybe. Next week, to be continued. Shavua Tov. Oh, yeah, you want to? Yes, it's great, isn't it? Ah.
Interesting.